Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of 3 paddle strops, all from the company Z-Strops. Now first off, in the name of full disclosure, thank you very much to Z-Strops for sending these guys along. And in fact, these knives were provided to me for free from the manufacturer. When he reached out, I said, as always, that these are going to get the full good, the great, the bad, and the ugly. They may be gems, they may be junk, and he decided, no, he'd still send them along. Brave of him. And then he actually went a step further, without my asking, and frankly, without even telling me. He engraved these guys with, in this case, Nick Shabazz, creating good, great, bad, and ugly YouTube videos. There were some ugly ones out there for sure. And did the same thing on this little guy right here. I think in many ways he's showing off for his engraver buddy and giving them free advertising, but you know, okay, whatever. But regardless, I tried not to let the fact that these were free or that they were engraved affect my review too much here. Second, what is a strop? I don't really talk much about stropping, but the basic idea with stropping is that you run the edge of the blade against some sort of a material. Usually it's a leather, although you can do it with wood or cardboard, well, balsa wood. And basically the idea is that you're aligning the metal grains on the very edge and bringing it to a slightly keener edge than it might have been previously. And this is absolutely, stropping is a great idea, and it is the absolutely best way to keep your knife scary sharp and to maintain that edge between sharpenings. It will never bring a completely dull knife back to sharp, but it will keep a sharp knife sharp for a long, long time. And this is the first sharpening-related skill that a knife enthusiast should pick up, because the results can be great. Some folks use a strap-style strop, where it is a flexible strap with a leather. That's what I use for straight razors. But for actual pocket knives, I tend to prefer paddle strops like these. They are easier on the table to use or on the couch or something like that, and I've used a paddle strop for many years. This has been my well, this is the one I used a lot previously. But anyways, you can see it's a little worse for the wear at this point. But anyways, there are 3 models of this guy from the Z-Strops. There is this huge one over here, which he refers to as the big-ass strop. And this guy's price is $160, which is a lot of freaking money. But you can see it's two-sided and everything. Then there's this guy in the middle here, which is I believe it's a 2x10 block. And this guy is $40, and that's less money, but it's still up there. And then there's this little tiny guy here, which is $30, little small paddle guy. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of the strops overall. I'll highlight any individual good, great, bad, and ugly. And then in my conclusion, I'll talk about which of these, if you want to do something from these guys, may be a best choice for you. Of course, it's my channel, got to do a size comparison. And in fact, size is important here. If you were using really, really big knives on a regular basis, it's probably a good idea to get a bigger strop. Because, well, you know, you don't want to necessarily have to, every time you do a stroke on this guy, pull all the way down. You can do it, you can sharpen it, but, you know, sometimes it's nice to have that slightly bigger width on there for a slightly bigger knife. And then finally, I got a comment. Z-Strops is not in any way related to Z Hunter that I am aware of. The guy's last name is Preston Zylick. Or, well, that's his whole name. But whatever it is, so that's where the Z is coming from. So let's go on ahead, with all that said, and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of these very interesting little strops here. Okay, so on the good side, first off, I do like the option for laser engraving. Not only is it a nice touch if you want to give somebody a gift, like a total knife nerd or something, but it can also be very nice, particularly having the micron rating of there, because you can put many different kinds of compound onto these, from a very, very fine, like 0.5 micron, to something much coarser, like 5 or 6. I tend to use 3 a lot, but, you know, I've often found myself with other strops marking down the type of compound that I've put on there. So I've written 1 on here, and then the other side I know is 0.05. This is another strop from another person entirely that one of these days I get around to reviewing. But look, it's a nice thing to have that right on there and completely non-confusable. And, you know, it's nice for the branding and whatnot, too. So the laser engraving as an option is very, very nice. Next thing, the finishing on these guys are very nice. The big guy is absolutely beautifully finished. It is a very nice object, but even these block strops, they're nicely done. There's a little bit of chamfer on the corners here. They're not in any way, shape, or form like splintery at any point. They are very nicely finished pieces of wood, and you can tell he's stained them nicely and paid good attention. I mean, they're nicely done chunks of wood, and that is a little thing, but they feel made rather than manufactured, which is nice. Next thing, the leather on these guys is very nice. I mean, take a look at the thickness of the leather on here, as opposed to on this guy, for instance, which is a commercially bought strop that came with a shaving kit way long ago. You can see here that the leather on this guy is relatively thin, and it's unfortunately not very well adhered. You can see it's peeling up in the corner there, but the thing is, the leather on these guys has been very nicely done. I mean, it's very thick, it's laid down very evenly, and with very good adhesive. In the 8 months I've had these guys, because I don't strop very often, so it took me a long time to come to a good consensus for the review here, it's stayed down, and it's just beautiful, and you can tell he's sanded the leather flat. They're very nicely done in that way. There's no trouble with these leathers, and in fact, they're attached nicely, and I like the thickness. And frankly, if I gouge into it, I can sand it down again. There's a little bit of extra kind of play in here, so even if I, have a problem, I can fix it, reload it, and I'm back in business. So I love the fact that he's using this nice thick leather here, which is good. Next thing, where the strop was preloaded, and this guy came preloaded, as well as this guy and its companion, which I don't have on camera because I ran out of space, which is in 1 micron, but they came preloaded, and where that happened, it was very well done. It was a pretty thick application of what feels like a good quality compound. And I've got one in 1 micron, one in 3 micron, and this is a 3.5 green compound, and they work very nicely. He's using good stuff, and so that's nice too. And then finally, I gotta say, on these blocks, as well as the big guy, although the big guy is really meant to be held in hand, but on the blocks, the thickness of these guys is nice, because as you're using these, especially on a table or something, you want to have a little bit of room below the knife for your fingers to kind of slide down there, because for half of your cuts, your finger, and this is a really bad angle, do not learn from this, it's hard to do this on camera at the wrong angle. But anyways, you will often have your fingers riding down below the surface, the level of the strop, and so having a little bit of height on this block is very much something I appreciated and made it much easier and more ergonomic to use this guy flat on a table. So that's what's good about the strops in general. There are a couple of little details for individual ones. For instance, on the big guy, I do tend to like a two-sided strop because they're very nice for minimizing the amount of space needed. If you're using one-sided strops, then if you want 2 compounds, you need 2 strops, and that kind of adds up very quickly in terms of space in your life. Two-sided is nice for that, and also, like I said, the big size can be very helpful, particularly with very long knives, and kitchen knives particularly, I love this big size for. But that can be very nice. On the middle guy, it is very nice that they included these rubber feet here, which is good. And then on the smaller one, I do love the size of this guy for just sitting back, like for instance on the couch and stropping as I'm going, as I'm watching a movie or something like that. It's a very nice, calm activity. It's quiet. There's no freaking problem, and I can keep just an incredible edge on my knives by doing that periodically. So I like the size very much, and so that on the whole is the good here. Individually, I love the size of this guy. I love the rubber strips, keeping this from skidding around, and I love the two-sided nature and the size of this big guy. And then overall, I like the thickness of the blocks. I like the where the strop is preloaded. It's done well. Thick leather, good finishing, and the laser engraving, although not necessary, is kind of a nice touch in places. Let's talk about what's great. To me, what is great about these strops 100% is that they are perfectly functional as strops. I mentioned already the nice leather, which gives you the opportunity to sand it down if you gouge it out. That's good. But the thing is, even just more regularly, the leather is applied beautifully to this. There are no bunches, there are no ridges, there are no areas where it sticks up in one area. And it's put down very nicely. But more importantly to me, and the biggest thing that kills a strop in my experience, is that it is hollowed out someplace. For instance, I love this strop. It was one of the first nicest strops I ever bought, but the problem is that it has an unfortunate little hollow in here where there is, in the middle of this, an area where the leather is dipped down or the wood is dipped down. And as a result, as you're using it, part of the blade isn't actually touching when you think it should be. And that's really unpleasant. But these guys, as near as I can tell, are perfectly flat, and that makes them just work plain well. And so the great thing here is that they work beautifully for stropping, even though they also look pretty good. And that's one of those things that's both great and an absolute requirement. So there you go. That's what's great about these guys, is that they are very, very functional as strops, and from that function-minded standpoint, are done perfectly. Let's talk about what's bad. Okay, so on the bad side, first off, the price on these guys is a little bit higher than the norm. Because you can absolutely get a strop much cheaper than this. You can make a balsa wood strop yourself, flatten it out, and get similar performance in terms of putting a nice edge on a knife, but for way less cash. And compared to a mass-produced strop, like you'd, find online or something like that, these are going to be way more expensive. You can get something like this for $10, whereas you're paying, $30 for these guys. But the thing is, they are also nicer, so it's not something I am really too bent out of shape about. I think the quality is there. It's just pricey. That's a simple fact. Next thing, and this is completely a nitpick, but I am not particularly in love with the font here. The chancery sort of thing just doesn't do it for me. This may be based in past trauma of people who love this font or something, but I really do hope that font is an option that you get to choose when you pick the engraving out yourself. Because I don't particularly like this font, and it seems a little bit weird for me on a strop. I don't know, maybe I'm just crazy. Actually, we know I'm crazy. Next thing, they do not have a website or online store yet. Right now, they are based on email or Instagram, and I'll put that information down in the description there. But this is a little detail, but it's an area where a lot of small makers struggle. The idea of just have them email me or DM me on Instagram is pretty convenient for the maker, but it's an element of friction. And you don't need like a full store or a fully featured site. Even just a single official page with some pictures, a price list, and contact info is a great central clearinghouse, or an Etsy shop or something. Because people should be able to see a price list, some sample pictures, and learn a bit more about you without having to have any interaction. By forcing all information to come through an email to a random Hotmail address, you are sort of excluding the I'm just curious folks, or the folks who just don't want to interact with a human, and who might have made a purchase or sent the email if they knew exactly what they were ordering and what the prices were, but may not bother otherwise. So I hope this is something they're going to fix soon, and it's always something I advise small makers to consider. Give me a quick place I can Google and find you and know what I'm buying, and then I'll email you. But little detail, not a big thing. The individual strops do have some bad issues. One thing is that two-sided strops are a little bit tougher to store because, well, you've got compound on this side, you've got compound on this side. So if you set this down, for instance, on your kitchen table, you're going to be rubbing whatever's on your kitchen table into the compound. You'll be rubbing the compound into the kitchen table. That's not super ideal. So I end up having to store this guy on its side all the time. And, it's a little tippy. And something we need to keep in mind. And also, like I said, just using them on a table becomes less ideal. The other thing about this guy, particularly, is that it has an asymmetrical handle, which is great, and it makes good ergonomic sense for one side of the use. But the problem is that this is a strop that you flip over, and so having an asymmetrical handle doesn't make sense when it needs to be usable symmetrically. Not a big deal, but it is something that I could probably skip in the future. And then finally, a note. This comes with a smooth and a suede finish. I tend to prefer the smooth finish for modern pocket knives. Suede can be very nice, but it adds maybe a little bit of rounding sometimes to the edge, and it requires maybe a little more compound to load it really effectively. So that's something that if I were to reorder this again in the future, I would probably do smooth on both sides. But again, hey, whatever. On the block one, I gotta say that the block shape, although I like it in many ways, it's a little bit hard to grip for handheld use, particularly because it's not quite deep enough that it's just gonna sit naturally in your hand. And so I'm always slightly afraid that because I'm dragging this blade right above my fingers and my thumb there. And that's a vaguely scary experience. And so in many ways, I would kind of prefer, and again, bad technique because I'm under a camera, but in a lot of ways, I would actually kind of prefer that there be both the rubber desk feet, which are a great idea, as well as a small handle off the back of it, so you could use this guy sitting on the couch. Not a big deal, but it is a deal, and I think that's the reason that a lot of paddle strops are made with that handle on there. But it's kind of doing a different thing. Then finally, the mini strop little guy, I like a lot, but it's not very usable on a desk, because if you sit this guy down, there is definitely some element of rocking and rolling because the handle itself is rounded off there. And so I kind of wish that there was a little bit more of a strong facet on here that allowed this to sit with at least 3 points of contact here without any ability to, so that way if you wanted to, you could still use this on a table. Although again, the height isn't great for being on a table. And then also, the little guy, the ergonomics could be a little bit better. Maybe a little bit more palm swell for it might help this feel a little bit better in the hand. But again, it's not something you're going to be gripping every day, all the time, and it's more than fine for what I'm usually doing with it. So, to me at least, that's the bad, is that the ergos could be a little better on this guy, and it doesn't sit evenly on a desk. The block shape's hard to grip in the hand. I'm not a big fan of the asymmetrical handle. I'm not a big fan of the suede finish. And two-sided strops are a little harder to store, but that's not this strops problem. That's the problem with the configuration. And then on the whole, I'm not a fan of them lacking a website. I'm not loving the font that they're using here, and the price is higher than what you might pay for a strop elsewhere. But again, they're doing good work. Let's go into the ugly. First off, on the ugly side, I really do hope that the Rhode Island custom engraving branding is left off for customer-facing strop. I kind of suspect that this was the engraver wanting a little bit of publicity too on the one going out to YouTube, but honestly, it's a little bit annoying, and particularly on this little guy where the name of the company isn't even on there, but Rhode Island Custom Engraving is huge. I just don't love that. And having it on everything is kind of diluting the Z-Strops brand a little bit. Is this made by Z-Strops or Rhode Island Custom Engraving? It's kind of like, at some level, I just don't give a damn who engraved these. I mean, they did nice work, but that's completely uninteresting to me as the Strop's eventual owner. It's like carving the name of the guy who sold you the G10 into the scales of a knife. It's just not what's relevant there. And so I think if somebody wants to get engraving and they're thinking, wow, this was well done, I wonder who did that, they can always contact the maker. But putting that on there, to me, is just ugly, and it's unnecessary, and it's just more crap on the thing that it doesn't need to have on there. Then finally, on the ugly side, I am not, I love this big-ass strop. It's very, very nice, but it is way far up the curve of diminishing returns, because $160 is a ton of freaking money. And let's be real here, it doesn't perform any better, with the exception of size, than either of the smaller ones. And so you are effectively paying big money here for a luxury strop. You are getting something that is beautifully made, that is very, very nice in the hand. I mean, there's a lot of good to it, but you're paying for luxury. And considering that that's what I do for watches and, for knives elsewhere, I mean, that's not completely out of line, no judgment, but you need to know that when you go big here, you are buying fancy rather than functionality. And that's something you're going to want to keep in mind. So, to me, that's the ugly, is that this guy is way far up the curve of diminishing returns, where you're paying a lot for stuff that isn't necessarily functional. And then I really don't like the engraver's name being on there, especially as huge as it is here, because that's just not necessary information. And seems to kind of lose the point a little bit. So, let's go into the final conclusions. Look, final conclusion. First off, to be 100% fair, you do not need to buy a strop at this kind of level to maintain your knife. Stropping is available to pretty much anybody on any budget. You can go down to a hardware store or a woodworking shop or even Amazon and order some basic polishing compound. Go for like a 3-micron sort of thing. Then you can apply that to an old belt, to the cardboard back of a legal pad, to a flat chunk of balsa wood, provided it's really flat. And you can buy $10 balsa wood strops online and then load them up. Look, you lose some durability in some cases, and true flatness can be a battle. But it is absolutely possible to get similar performance for less cash by doing a strop yourself. And so I don't want you to feel like these are the price of admission for effectively maintaining your blades. And of course, there are also benefits to using a strap-style strop because, well, they're much better for recurves is the big one for me. That's the time when I reach for a strap rather than one of these guys. But that said, if stropping is something that you're doing on a very regular basis, it's not unreasonable to invest in nicer tools. A legal pad is not very ergonomic to use on a table, for instance, and you sure as heck can't use it sitting on the couch. And there's also something to be said for not stropping your Ron Best Custom on the back of a legal pad. I mean, let's be real here. And so if you're looking for very nice stropping tools, these are absolutely very nice stropping tools. What they've done here is make something that is 100% functional for stropping. It's got the kind of flatness that you desperately need in a strop. It's got a thickness and quality of leather that you're not going to find in a lot of your little production sorts of things. And frankly, they're using good compounds and they're loading them on there well. But at the same time, they're also making pretty objects that are very nice in that kind of more, this is a nice thing sort of sense. And so I very much enjoyed using these guys, and I can absolutely recommend them. If you've decided to go with Z-Strops for a strop, you may be asking, well, which one should I get? Well, look, the big guy is absolutely beautiful, and frankly, it's nice enough that, at least in my heart, I think it is a little bit of a gem. But the thing is, it's absolutely overkill. 100 freaking percent. And so unless you want a beautiful object that can also maintain your knives, you are probably better off spending the money you would have spent buying the big guy on buying one of these and taking someone you like out to a nice dinner. This is great, but it's a kind of great that you probably just don't need. The block strops are very, very nice, particularly on a table. And if you have a lot of bigger knives that you're sharpening, whether they're kitchen knives or big old hunters or crazy cold steels, a big strop has a lot of benefits because it's just easier to use a big strop in that way. And if you can only do one of these strops, that's probably the safest bet. And I would actually recommend that you go with the 3 micron as well, because it's a nice middle of the road. 1 micron is great and it can get a much more polished edge on things, but this is a great way to maintain sharpness. It's aggressive enough that it won't take you forever, but it's not so aggressive that it's gonna just be a problem. Look, 3 micron's a great compromise. But being honest with you here, the one that I end up using most is this little guy right here, because it's very, very nice, it's compact, and I can just sit back on the couch as I'm watching a TV show or something and strop the knife that I've been carrying, or the knives, just like anytime I realize something's dull, I grab it, I grab this guy, I sit back on the couch. And you know what? The small size also handles weak recurves, which are unfortunately common in modern knives, a little bit better than usual. And so I think this is a really nice choice too. And so if you're just picking one of these guys, you could go here or you could go here, and I don't think you'd be going wrong either way. But yeah, like I said, regardless, final conclusion, stropping, beautiful thing. One of the best skills that you can pick up as a knife collector, and even a very basic do-it-yourself setup will help keep your collection in better shape. But if you find yourself wanting a nicer strop, I can absolutely recommend these guys without a second thought, because they are very, very nicely made objects, and they are also supremely functional tools, and they are better than the production sorts of strops I found out in the past. And so, if you've got the cash to pay a little bit more to get something a little nicer, and you've got the need of a strop, which I think pretty much every knife guy does, I am absolutely not going to strop you from picking one of these guys up. Anyways, hope this is interesting, that you enjoyed the 3-in-1 review, and that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful and well-honed rest of your day. Bye now.